And Kate?
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Kate Rubicava. I use the pronouns she, her. And as we begin, I want to honor the ancestral and unceded lands of the Goshute, Ute, and Shoshone peoples. And I want to acknowledge the significance of place and the continued existence and contributions of Indigenous people who have lived on and cared for this land for thousands of years. Congressman Curtis, thank you so much for spending some time with nonprofits today. Nonprofits in Utah are pivotal to the overall success of our communities. Utah's nonprofits bring comfort, inspiration, hope, food, shelter, healing, and education to the people and communities of Utah. Our communities ultimately see cleaner air and water, support for survivors of domestic violence, care for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, warm and safe places for people to sleep at night, enriched perspectives from the arts, respite for both children and adults as they come to the end of their lives, as well as other life-changing benefits from nonprofits living their missions. Utah's nonprofits support, nurture, and enhance the lives of all Utahns. And we've recently learned that while our economy is performing quite well overall, our country's third sector, the nonprofit sector here in Utah, is experiencing significant challenges in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. 74% of nonprofits saw an increase in the demand for services. Revenues decreased by 30% in 2020 when compared to 2019. Estimates for 2021 revenue are 10% lower than they were in 2020, and nonprofits are projecting a 37% decline in the 2021 staffing levels compared to pre-pandemic numbers. So this perfect storm of increased demand, reduced funding, and staff cuts as a result of COVID-19 and its accompanying economic crisis have left nonprofits really scrambling to provide critical services to society's most vulnerable populations. Cutting both staff and services in a time of increased demand creates ongoing and far-reaching consequences for our communities. And because the nonprofit sector is so critical in our state, we at the UNA work to inform, educate, and partner with elected officials on solutions to these challenges. So Congressman Curtis, we really look forward to hearing from you today and learning the many ways that you're working to support nonprofits in Utah. And as we get started, let me first introduce our guest. Congressman John Curtis represents Utah's 3rd Congressional District and serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committees. He was elected in 2017, and the Congressman cares deeply about hearing the diverse perspectives and feedback from his constituents. He has held hundreds of town halls. Utah's 3rd District is the youngest in the country with an average age of 26 years old. The Congressman is also sensitive to the many constituents that live in rural Utah and has focused on legislation that can fit needs of both demographics, such as student loans, rural broadband access, and more. Prior to coming to Washington, Congressman Curtis was the 47th mayor of Provo, serving 2 terms. Known for his personal approach to city government, then Mayor Curtis prioritized his outreach to residents of Provo by utilizing various channels, including a popular blog. Congressman Curtis, thank you so much for leading the cause for the 3rd District. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Kate. That was a delightful introduction. It's great to be with you all today. And as I think about what you do, I just hope you know how much appreciation I have in my heart for the many contributions that you and so many in organizations that may not be on the line today make around our state. I feel like my time as mayor is perhaps the most valuable thing that I could have as far as knowing how important your role is in a city and in a community. Sometimes in Congress, we're 2,000 miles away physically from much of what's happening in the district where there's suffering or help that's needed. But a mayor sees that firsthand every day in this community. And I'm so grateful for the many nonprofits that I worked with as mayor and the work that I saw them do. Sometimes government likes to pat ourselves on the back for all the great work we do. A mayor knows that the bulk of the work is not done by government, but done by many great people like yourselves. I also know that there's hardly a corner of our society where you're not needed. Sometimes even where we don't see needs, I know that there are needs. And so I'm grateful to all of you that fill those needs in such a variety of ways and in many different ways, personal sacrifices that you all make to do that. Now, you can listen to me for an hour or I can answer your questions. I have a sneaking suspicion you'd rather let me answer your questions than to let me drone on. So with that, Kate, let's see what questions people have on their minds.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll let Randy guide that.
Absolutely. At this point, if you do have a question or a discussion that you would like to have with Congressman Curtis, you can unmute yourself at any moment, or if you would prefer, you can also type it into the chat, and I'm more than willing to speak your question to verbalize it for you. Any questions from the group?
Colin, I'm going to give you a call out if you don't ask a question. How have you been and what have you been up to?
Oh, I was waiting for that. So I'm here at the Utah Nonprofits Association.
Excellent.
So I work with these wonderful people and as their public policy coordinator. And yeah, and I live in Salt Lake right now. So no longer in Provo, but.
Colin and I had a brief, how long was it, Colin, that you were with the city?
Oh, just slightly over a year. Yeah.
An opportunity to work together. And Colin, you can probably relate to what I'm saying that the city sees as far as needs that is very important. So good to see your smiling face. I'm glad you're doing well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see you again too.
Okay, well, I am not seeing any questions in the chat. If anybody would like to unmute, you can always do that. So to get us started, one of the things that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I see that Neil has a question.
Fantastic. Good catch, Colin.
Thank you. I didn't want to just jump in. So I heard Kate speaking about some of the difficulties facing nonprofits in general, especially staffing and logistical problems that have been introduced. And in light of that, I'm curious what Representative, what the representative thinks about some of the provisions in the proposed American Families Plan. I do child nutrition work, and some of these, the summer EBT program and the expansion of the community eligibility provision, simplifying and streamlining funding for school meals are all things that eliminate the middleman and to decrease demands on nonprofits and other care providers in order to get these services to the community. I'm just interested to hear the representative's thoughts on that.
So Neil, thank you. And tell me just a little bit more of a slice of who you represent. Maybe if, as you ask questions, you can all give me a slice of who you represent.
Oh, I'm the child nutrition advocate for Utahns Against Hunger. I think you may know our ED, Gina Corneo.
Sure, yeah. So Neil, you bring up probably a question that will never be resolved as long as I'm alive, right? Which is kind of what's the proper role for everybody, and how do we best facilitate services and getting delivered, and how much of that should government just kind of kick in and do, and how much of that we should rely on good people to do, and how much should we fund, and how much should we rely on private sector to fund. And I'll tell you that it's no secret right now that with single party control really of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, there is a strong a push towards government doing more of these. If I understood you right, that can be a two-edged sword. I think if that's the point that you were making, is that that's not a bad ambition for government, but if not careful, we'll actually crowd out the people that have been doing that work and maybe closer to the problem. Is that am I reading you right?
Well, I don't know that I would characterize it that way. I just think that the pandemic and the strain on resources that we've seen as a result have really laid bare what the arenas for specific arenas where nonprofits do work and where they can falter more readily. I know that from Census Pulse surveys, we know that school meals, for instance, are one of the most readily accessed sources for, well, not strictly speaking emergency food, but for supplemental meals for families who are struggling to find food. It's up there even above things like churches or even help from their family. And so I'm wondering how you view programs like that relative to other supports more directly to nonprofits that then provide services and are in turn suffering from lacks of labor, et cetera.
If so, it's a balance, right? If I had a wish, I think we would err on the side of helping nonprofits do the work. And the reason I say that is, as a general rule, you're on the ground. You know how to fix problems. You know what the problems are. Sometimes we come in from 2,000 miles away and say, "Hey, we know best, right? Let us solve this." More often than not, the people on the ground are going to know a lot more. And so, I can't tell you exactly where I draw that line, but I can just tell you my default would be to lean more on nonprofits to do that work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would like to call on Mike now.
Thank you, Brandy. And first off, Congressman, I was in communication with one of your staffers, Troy Dougal, earlier, or actually last month, and had a great conversation with him over Zoom. So I just wanted to mention that. But one of the issues that my nonprofit is struggling with is that we would really like to take advantage of funding from the SBA through the EIDL program. But the way that is administered is it is so overwhelmingly chaotic that it is impossible to actually get an answer from them on anything. And we did take a loan for 6 months of revenue last year, and we want to take advantage now of the full 24 months, except that they somehow misplaced our paperwork from last year, and now our application is in limbo, and no one has any idea how to get it out of limbo. And if I call the SBA a dozen times and ask for help, I'll get a dozen different answers from people over the phone. So is there any way that Congress can actually make that program, the EIDL program, run as smoothly as the Paycheck Protection Program has been run, which Paycheck Protection Program has been super easy and super quick to get things done?
Yeah, first of all, Troy is an amazing young man, a great part of our staff. Thanks for giving him a shout out. My chief of staff is on the line, as well as my state director, and we always love to hear that feedback about the people that work for us. I have to smile because while we can list the PPP as one effective government program, it would be pretty lonely in a long list of ineffective government programs, which is partly why I gave Neil the answer I did just a minute ago, is the more that we outsource that, I think the better that we do. I would love to learn more about that. I'll talk to Troy about your specific situation and see if we can find things that Congress can do. And as you well know, our ability as Congress to impact a program like that is pretty marginal because we can pass laws and we can fund, but it's hard for us to get into the minutia. But what we can do is help individual people through the system. And so if you, Mike, or others that are listening are experiencing similar problems where a program that we've put into place is just not working the way we intended, we would welcome those calls into the office and see if we can't expedite that. And we can certainly do that with you, Mike, and others that are listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Any other questions? You can unmute or put it into the chat at any moment. We're gonna sit here in an awkward silence. Yes, Gina, please.
Representative Curtis, thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. One of the things that we have really seen over the pandemic, Utahns Against Hunger has been working on anti-hunger issues for almost 40 years. And emergency food pantries, food banks are a really great resource, but they can't provide the kind of food to families that they always want to eat. And we believe that allowing folks to purchase their own food through programs like SNAP and the pandemic EBT, and hopefully the summer EBT, which is in the American Families Act, will pass, because we believe that folks should be able to buy the food that they want. But one of the other things that has become very apparent is that families need cash. I mean, that's what has been so great about the stimulus. And coming into the recovery, we know that low-income families are not faring as well as other folks. And so my question is to what extent do you support increasing the minimum wage? And if you don't support if you don't support increasing, I couldn't think of that word, increasing the minimum wage, would you support strengthening the federal nutrition programs that support these working families?
Gina, we probably need a whole hour, right, just for that, the question.
Yeah, put us down. We'd love to come meet with you, Representative.
Yeah, and happy to do that. Let me just say a couple of things. We mentioned the PPP program and things like that. As a member of Congress, I'm incredibly proud of a number of things that we did in the heat of the pandemic. But I also realize we didn't get it perfect, right? We were making decisions literally to spend trillions of dollars in just a week or so time. And I think it's remarkable the number of things we did right, but I think it's also noteworthy the things that we could have done better. And I think particularly this last round of funding, I wish that we could have been a little bit more selective in a little bit more high income individuals that received that funding. And I wish we could have used that for people who were struggling the very most. I wish we could be more selective with this $300 unemployment, which our governor has now taken away, right? But if I think the right answer is not 100% in or 100% out of that program, but can we use that tool more selectively for those most in need? And so I think at heart, first of all, Congress should do a better job of spending more time on these programs to get them to those most in need, and not use money on recipients. And I got to tell you, I have 6 kids. All 6 of them were not influenced a penny by COVID, and they all received the stimulus money, right? And so to be truthful, I wish even my own kids, right, we could have redirected that into places that were really truly in need. Now, the question of a higher minimum wage is awfully complex, right? Let's go back for a moment just before COVID, when we were experiencing the lowest Black, the lowest Hispanic unemployment in the history of our country. I regret that we couldn't see that play out, because I think you would have seen wages rise pretty dramatically in those classes, right, that are below current minimum wage right now. And instead, what we're trying to do is say, well, let's flip this and we'll force those wages up, and that's fine. But my preferred alternative is that we create a situation where the unemployment is low enough that it's driving those prices up themselves. I think another problem I have, Gina, with the conversations around a minimum wage is that we're trying to do the same thing in San Juan, Utah, as we're trying to do in Manhattan, New York, which is take wages to $15. And in reality, if you're making $15 in Manhattan, New York, it's nowhere close, right, to enough money. And if you're making $15 in San Juan, you may be doing okay, maybe still hurting, right, but certainly not like Manhattan. And therefore, I tend to favor more localized fixes and solutions to that. We've got things like Davis-Bacon and other things like that are that do a better job of accommodating those regional differences. So I don't have a blanket yes or no. I support a higher minimum wage. Clearly, I support finding programs, mechanisms, forces that lift those most in need, giving them a hand where they need a hand, helping them achieve things when they can already do some things themselves. And let's face it, we've spent a lot of money. The question I think we need to ask ourselves, if we put it in the right place and if we help the right people.
Great, thank you. And we would love to follow up, even at $15 an hour full time. That's only just over $31,000 a year. Certainly not after payroll deductions and taxes. Is that enough to raise a family? And many of those families would still qualify for free or reduced price meals and for SNAP. So we would love to talk to you further about how you can support some of the provisions that will be coming up in child nutrition reauthorization, and as well as the Families First Act.
Yeah, Gina, if you'll look in the chat, my chief of staff has put his email in there. And
yes, I will email Corey.
And Lori, the state director, is also on the line, and she can help us arrange something here locally as well. So happy to have that discussion. You bet.
Thank you, Representative.
I'll jump in. Hello, Congressman Curtis. Thank you so much for being here today. My name's Elizabeth Garby. I'm Senior Director of Government Relations with the United Way of Salt Lake. Years ago, you actually helped come testify in support of 2-on-1 with me. So it's been a little while since I've actually seen you. And I do want to say thanks for all you're doing in Congress. You know, United Way of Salt Lake firmly believes that that we each have a part in helping families, and the government is one of our critical partners in ensuring that children grow up healthy and successful, as well as families are financially stable. So I think that as we've always been concerned with how families are doing, and one of the things that COVID has done is really shine a bright light on where the system is broken. And one of those areas is childcare. While I think in Utah, we were pretty lucky in that our childcare industry didn't get crushed in the same way that it did in other states. We didn't see mass leaving of the system, and they were also able to keep their doors open. But I think that as we've gotten further along, it's been really difficult in being able to find and then retain staff, because it's an extremely difficult job. And we know that margins are really small in being able to keep doors open. So subsidies and things like that definitely help families not only access childcare, but we also have to make sure we're supporting the overall system so that there's even a facility for families to go to. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on legislation that will be coming forward that can better support not only our childcare industry, but then also families and being able to access quality childcare, because really childcare, education of our children starts from day one, and being able to have one person at home to take care of your children is a privilege and a luxury that not all families have. And so childcare really is important to family financial stability and then our economy overall, as well as children.
Yeah, let me first give a shout out to United Way. That's probably unfair to single you out. I just had such an amazing experience with Bill Holderstrom here in Utah County when I was mayor, and realized that he touched so many nonprofits, right? And so really warm feelings in my heart for the good work that you all do. And Bill was an incredible mentor to me in helping me see the needs of the community and where to apply resources, and just really appreciate the good work that's done there. I think, if I'm honest, one of my great regrets about my time as the mayor of Provo City is that we knew in our heart that we needed to do a better job with employees and childcare, and we couldn't find that path forward to find a good solution. And I think clearly it's in a business's best interest, an entity's best interest, if they can play a role in that. Clearly that doesn't solve the problem for everybody, but it as you say, it's a piece of a puzzle, right? There's lots of pieces to this puzzle. And I think some corporations that have done that and are subsidizing that, it's been very good for them, and it's been good for their organization. I'm not fluent enough on upcoming legislation to be specific for you, but would welcome your input as this legislation comes before us to say, hey, this is good, or this is bad, or if we could change this, it would be good. Would welcome that feedback. Acknowledging, I think you said it very well. I had to smile at Mitt Romney's comment a few weeks ago about he didn't know he was disadvantaged because he grew up with a mom in the home. It is very lucky when children can grow up with a parent in the home, and our reality is that can't always happen, and it's not just an occasional thing, it's a frequent thing where that isn't an option. And Bill used to tell me all the time that if our kids are not learning to read by third grade or so, right, it puts a huge detriment on them in the future. And I think that's, what you're saying, and I'm echoing, is that's maybe not third grade, that's at 3 years, right, where that learning takes place. And if they miss that, it's really unfortunate. So would love to stay close with you as this legislation comes forward, and would welcome your input on it.
Thank you. I'll definitely follow up with you on childcare specific legislation, as well as obviously we care about a lot of areas. But
yes, I know you do, and you do a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Such amazing conversations happening. Thank you all so much for jumping in and asking the questions that you have in front of you. I'm going to open it up again for an opportunity to ask questions. You can unmute yourself at any time. You can also speak over me. I'm very comfortable with that as well.
And me, you can speak over me too.
I can go ahead and ask a question. All right, let's see. So something we have been keeping our eyes on here at UNA is the Work Now Act, as introduced by Representative Linda Sanchez of California. It's HR 1987. And this Work Now Act would create a grant program for nonprofits, and especially nonprofits that are still trying to recover from the effects of the pandemic. And so it also allocates $50 billion towards this grant program and other needs. And we really feel like there, as the economy rebounds and as it gets back up to speed, there's still a need out there for nonprofits to receive help, and we feel the Work Now Act offers at least an avenue for the federal government to provide that help. And so not sure if your staff has seen it yet, but we would like you to consider this and hear your thoughts about providing more relief, especially towards nonprofits.
Thank you. I'm not personally familiar with it, but that's why we've got staff on the line, and we'll task them with taking a look at that, Colin, and we'll talk about it. I do think there's a companion piece to that we've got to figure out as a society, and that is that, interestingly, some have really prospered during COVID, and businesses, some have prospered, and even what we thought originally was going to be a loss for state and local governments is in many cases turned into surpluses. And I think you all over the years have done an amazing job of engaging not just government, but the business community and individuals, and that we can't lose sight at this time when some have done extremely well to engage them in this as well. and help them understand why we need their help now more than ever.
Is there?
Well, if no one else is going to jump in, I will jump in again. My previous comment was in the role of managing my nonprofit itself, but now I want to talk about the work that we're actually trying to do. We are advocating for expanding Amtrak service across Utah so that we can connect from the Wasatch Front north to Logan and southwest to Cedar City and St. George and southeast to Moab and Grand Junction. And we have researched other routes throughout the country that have similar demographics. And we are anticipating that even on the bottom end of our ridership estimates, that would generate probably about 500,000 trips per year throughout the state of Utah. And that would be taking a tremendous amount of traffic off of Utah highways and could potentially save UDOT a lot of money. So we are looking for support for that, and in general support that would expand passenger rail and intercity bus service and transit service around the country.
Mike, I like to joke with my staff that I've got a piece of my rear end missing, and that got taken away from me on a transit project I worked on. And it was tough. We put in bus rapid transit here in the Provo-Orem area. And boy, it was so clear to me how important this was for many demographics in our community. And you're right, it takes cars off the street, it helps with pollution, it gives access to people who don't have an automobile or can't use an automobile. I mean, the list is endless. And so are the detractors endless. And you probably know that if you're in that world, you probably have a piece of your part of you missing as well that you've donated to the cause. But I do know, and I'll go back and put my mayor's hat on, how incredibly important these transit projects are in a community. And I've thought a million times how grateful I am for the pioneers who put tracks in Salt Lake City. And I know they fought the same opposition I fought here in my city at the time, of people saying we don't need it, it won't be used. I know that they fought that because I was one of those voices that say, oh, nobody will use that, right? Now, can you imagine years later taking tracks away from us, and how many cars that would put into the system, how many people would not be able to get to work? And so I am a fan of transportation, multiple modes of transportation, and particularly, now I'm not as familiar with Amtrak as I am with UTA and UDOT, but I keep us posted on your progress there and what you're working on. I know that bringing Front Runner down just to Provo was a huge benefit for many people. There's discussions about getting it further down. And I know the mayors in Spanish Fork and Payson would love it to get down that far, and that's in discussion as well. And I know additional bus transit systems are in discussion here in Utah County. And those things take a combination of local, state, and federal government to pull them off. And I think we're pretty well coordinated most often in our efforts to do that. So thanks for the update on that, and would love to see your progress, and please let us know if you feel like we can be helpful.
Fantastic. I am always impressed by the breadth and depth of our nonprofits and how we are all so invested in our community. And I just really appreciate it every time I get to hear about what our work is doing for our communities. One of the questions that I've had is that we have heard, I don't know how else to say it, that there's discussion or potential discussion around the repurposing of unused COVID stimulus money. Some that it's just kind of sitting there. And I was wondering if you could kind of tell us what your thoughts are, what you're hearing around the unused COVID money and the potential to repurpose that.
So I believe strongly that we need to take a hard look at money that's unspent and ask ourselves why, right? Do the programs need to be, for instance, the timelines? Do we need to extend the timelines? Or are they simply, did they reach their, what we intended them to do with less money than we thought that they would need? This $300 unemployment is a really good example where we've just stopped taking it here in Utah. So what are we going to do with that money that's already been appropriated? And I do think it would be fiscally responsible, and just as you would in your nonprofits, if you had started down a path on a project and it didn't cost you as much as you thought it would, you'd repurpose that money. You'd use it for something else that was desperately needed. And so I think that discussion is a healthy one. I don't think every single category fits into the same bucket, right? Some might be, like I said, we just need to extend the deadline. It's a good program. We want to continue it. Let's extend the deadline. Some might be, it's just the life is no longer needed on that. And so let's repurpose it. So I do think that's a healthy discussion, and I would love to know more about what's there and what's unused.
So would we. So
yeah,
we'd love to be a part of the conversation.
I suspect we're talking upwards of trillion and maybe even more dollars, right? That not doing anybody any good in sitting there appropriated and unused.
Fantastic. Well, I do know that you have another engagement directly after this. I would like to offer up the opportunity for any additional questions, comments, sharing about the incredible work that you do in your communities. And we're just going to let it sit in awkward silence, which is totally healthy.
Well, I'm just going to say thank you.
Yeah, that's the best kind of awkward silence I know, Mike. Thank you.
I appreciate that as well. Well, with that, I do believe, unless anybody has any last questions, that we will be closing out our time together this afternoon. Thank you so much again for your time, for listening, and for being willing to be a part of the conversation and helping our nonprofits throughout Utah help our communities thrive and the families and people that we all love and support throughout Utah. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon as well.
Thank you. Thanks for your good work.
Thank you.
And take care, Congressman. Good to see you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.